Welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife, and I am dropping this episode this week early for you all because I'm recording on the 3rd. I didn't want to record on the 4th. I want to spend the 4th with my family. I want to spend Independence Day enjoying it. So I figured if I'm recording it early, might as well just drop it early so you can listen to it early if you feel like it. If not, oh well. Mostly today we're going to be talking about some fun facts about history, and there's some exciting developments for the podcast I want to let you all in on. As always, I'm your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, so announcements. Yay, we're going to start off with announcements. So, big news for me, super excited. We have this channel. Life of a Military Wife has been picked up by Audible. We've also been picked up by an Indian company that distributes podcasts in India. So, yay, if you're listening to me from India, welcome to the podcast. But with all of that, there's a lot of analytics that go into the show, and feedback and whatnot that makes it more accessible, helps me get on more platforms, helps me with distribution and whatnot. So I don't normally do a plug like this, but please like, comment, leave a review. It helps increase the visibility and the access to this information for people who are needing it and looking for it. For the longest time, I was the number one thing that would pop up when you typed in this title. That doesn't always happen on some of the platforms anymore. And it's just because traffic. So, yeah, if you are an Audible person, please come listen to me on Audible. I am on Audible now. So we're on Audible, Spotify, Google Podcast, bunch of other ones. So yeah, pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts, we probably are there. We're on iHeartRadio. We are having some issues with Apple Podcasts. That is the one. There's some technical glitches that have not been worked out, but it is what it is. So that is the wonderful, fabulous, fantastic announcement that I wanted to share with y'all before we hop into the fun facts about history for today. So let's jump into our first little fun story time. I love history, listen to it, a lot of different history, and just like watching documentaries and whatnot. But I was listening to something recently, or at least not too long ago, with my kids, and I learned something I had not learned before about the Battle of Bunker Hill. So, first, let's do some basic setup for history. The U.S. Army was established in June 14th, 1775. The Battle of Lexington and Concord had been earlier that April, on April 19th, 1775. That was when the British, shot heard around the world, started the revolution, dealio. Bunker Hill happened June 17th. So Army was created June 14th. First engagement was June 17th, Battle of Bunker Hill. The other thing that it's important to kind of keep in the back of your head is that the Americans actually made a mistake. They were told to fortify Bunker Hill, and unfortunately, the general walked right past Bunker Hill, which was taller, and fortified Breed's Hill, which was not as high and not as great of a vantage point. So that was a slight error on our part with that. The other issue was the Americans under General Israeli Putnam, they were told to fortify the hill, and they were told replacements were going to come to then protect the hill. The problem is the reinforcements did not come before the British under General Thomas Gage attacked. So General Thomas Gage had underneath his command Pitcairn. And I'm looking up. Oh, I want to make sure I've got his rank. Yes, Major John Pitcairn was the person in command at Lexington and Concord. This is a huge deal because the soldiers who were fighting, who had been digging the ditches and building the fortifications at Breeds Hill, Bunker Hill, um, were some of the ones who had been at Lexington and Concord. And Pitcairn had been the one who had allowed them to fire on and kill so many of the Minutemen at Lexington and Concord. So these soldiers directly blamed him for what had happened. And that caused a lot of animosity. So the British attack, and they attacked with 3,000 men, and the British attacked with 3,000. The Americans were defending with 2,400. And this is where, quite notably in history, one of, and I want to make sure I have the quote properly. Nope. I can't seem, of course I can't find it because of course I'm on the spot. Anyway, one of the US officers, one of the American officers said to his soldiers, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." And it was because they had limited ammunition. They weren't ready and for the engagement. And even though we were not quite ready, yeah, here it is. William Prescott. Ha! I got it. Found it for you all. William Prescott, an officer in the American Army, said, "Do not fire until you see the whites of their eyes." Then, as they advanced, the British ended up there was a total of 1,532 casualties. The British took 1,054 of those casualties, whereas the Americans only took 450. We did end up having to retreat. However, we did some serious damage. Like, not gonna lie, they did not take that little hill very easily. But part of what makes this all super interesting is in the aftermath, one of the things that was discovered, and it actually happened in the battle, but there's been some dispute on it after the fact. Major Pitcairn, that guy that everybody couldn't stand because they've blamed him for Lexington and Concord, he was shot and killed. But not only was he shot and killed, he was shot and killed by an African American soldier, by a black soldier in the Continental Army at the time. Now, there is some disputation because there were two African American soldiers serving there at the time. One was Peter Salem, and the other one, his first name was Salem Poor. So the American accounts say that it was Salem Poor. The British accounts say that it was Peter Salem. I really don't know why the British accounts would be more accurate than the American ones, but I'm just going to let you know about the discrepancy. However, he is the one credited with shooting Pitcairn. Evidently, he was a fabulous marksman and took out quite a few people, and he stood his ground and defended when a lot of other people were getting quite shaken up. Like, this was their first engagement. This was a big deal. This was the first battle, and a lot these men had not all of them had ever been charged with bayonets before. And so there were people who were scared, but he stood his ground and he was not. He really stood up to it all. So according to William Prescott, he sent a petition to the Massachusetts General Court asking for recognition for Salem Poor in the battle. And he said, quote, "He behaved like an experienced officer as well as an excellent soldier." And I just think that is fantastic that one of the first major engagement in U.S. military history, one of the best shots who took down an enemy officer and stood his ground was this amazing man. And again, there's disputation if it was Samuel Poor or Salem Poor or Peter Salem, but I'm going to go with what the commanding officers said at the time, which was Salem Poor. But anyway, I found that story and I just found it absolutely fantastic. So maybe you've heard of Salem Poor, maybe you haven't, but that made me super happy. I love learning new things about stories I thought I knew. And um the fact that he took out Major Pitcairn was fantastic. Like that, you had to be a pretty dang good shot. Those muskets were not very accurate. They did not have a lot of ammunition. And we did take out quite a few people, but Major Pitcairn was the most notable um, enemy officer. He was the only enemy officer, as far as I know, who was taken out, who was shot. So awesome job, Salem Poor. And I think that's absolutely commendable. First engagement of the U.S. Army, and we already had a sharpshooter. Anyway, that is the first one I wanted to cover. The other one I ran into, and I just love these weird little tidbits about history. So there is a YouTube channel that I love. It is called Tasting History. And, some of them are more fascinating to me, some aren't. He has done a lot of war related ones more recently, and I've really enjoyed those. And this last week or so, he did one about the Civil War. So we started off with the Revolutionary War. We're going to jump now to the Civil War. And we're going to cover a amusing story I had never heard before. And so again, I love history. I have been learning about history ever since I was a kid. It's what we talked about around the dinner table when I was growing up. So when I find something new, I'm just fascinated. And especially when it's an engaging, interesting fact, or in this case, a humorous story about a former president. So many of you will be familiar with President McKinley. Well, our wonderful president, as a 19/20-year-old, served in the Civil War. And when he was serving in the Civil War, he was the quartermaster and the commissary sergeant. And he did a pretty good job, but something really interesting happened to him on September 17th, 1862, when he was part of the 23rd Ohio Regiment. They were preparing for combat near Frederick, Maryland, and they didn't have time to stop for breakfast before they were sent off to battle. Well, Sergeant McKinley decided that his men not only needed food, they needed some good old coffee. Well, he was the commissary sergeant and he realized they were low on supplies. And so he decided to commandeer, or what's the good old fashioned army term? Strategically acquire. I don't know actually, but he got two heavy freight wagons, and now I'm going to actually quote. This is fantastic. What he did. I mean, when your guys are hungry, your guys are hungry, and you want to keep them fighting. So, it was nearly dusk when we heard a tremendous cheering from the left of our regiment, as we had been having heavy fighting right up to this time. Our division commander, General Scammon, sent me to find out the cause, which I very soon found to be Cheers for McKinley and his hot coffee. And that was by General J.L. Boastford of the Ohio Volunteers. And I think it's hysterical because he goes on to write a little bit more. When you consider the fact of his leaving his post of security, driving right into the middle of the bloody battle with a team of mules, it needs no words of mine to show the character and determination of McKinley, a boy at this time of about 20 years of age. Now, some say he was 20, some say he was 19. He was approximately 1920. McKinley loaded up two wagons with supplies, but the mules of one wagon were disabled, probably from driving through the battle. I'm interjecting, but going back to the quote, he was ordered back time and again, but he pushed right on. And so he not only did he go drive through the battle and get all of these supplies, he then came back and made breakfast and coffee for everybody. And Afterwards, so this next source for this story is kind of fun and fascinating. So the quote goes, early in the afternoon, naturally enough, with the exertion required of the men, they were famished and thirsty. So this was another officer's account of the situation. And ex, um, in some extent, broken in spirit. The commissary department of the brigade was under Sergeant McKinley's administration and personal supervision. From his hands, every man in the regiment was served with hot coffee and warm meats. He passed under fire and delivered with his own hands these things so essential for the men of whom he for whom he was laboring. And what makes this account particularly fascinating, in my opinion, is it was written by Rutherford B. Hayes, another U.S. president. Yes, evidently, Sergeant McKinley was serving with Rutherford B. Hayes in the same regiment, the 23rd Ohio Regiment. So, anyway, after this, he was promoted to lieutenant. So, evidently, if you want to go from sergeant to lieutenant, get people coffee in the middle of a battle, I guess is the, the lesson to learn from this. But I thought that was fantastic. I was like, dude, that is the most dangerous coffee run in U.S. military history. That is pretty fantastic. So yeah, there's even a monument dedicated to this. Which I think is also pretty awesome. It was put up after um McKinley's death. But yeah, it was he so I didn't and this was the other thing. So yeah, after McKinley was assassinated in Buffalo, New York, that's when it was after that. It was 2 years after that that the monument was put up dedicated to him and by the Ohio Veterans Association, and it was placed at the battlefield. So not only was it the most dangerous coffee run in military history, there's even a monument to it. So I found that really fun and entertaining. So on this 4th of July, if you're, wanting to impress your friends and relatives about your obscure military knowledge, there's two fun military facts for you. The first sharpshooter, first person to shoot a British or an officer of a foreign army in the Revolutionary War and in military history was Simon Poor, a Black or African American soldier, however you want to label that. And then the most dangerous coffee run in U.S. military history goes to none other than a former president who was 19 or 20 at the time, President McKinley. So I had fun with those little facts. And anyway, I enjoy those. If you find any fun little facts about history, please send them my way. I am still working on putting together some different things coming up later in this month. We've got a language learning expert who I have spoken to and I'm did a collab with. She is coming on the podcast to tell you all about how to up your language learning game. And as military spouses, just military in general, we tend to live in different places, work with people from different countries. Knowing another language is sometimes advantageous. So if you're wanting to up your language learning game, or if you're maybe a homeschooling family and you're trying to teach your kids a foreign language, this should be beneficial for you all. The other one is a wonderful military spouse who I know personally. She gives some tips, tricks, and pointers about running your own business, cottage business as a military spouse. So look for those episodes to be coming later on this month. I'm also trying to put together a homeschooling panel. So lots of fun and wonderful things coming down the pipeline for you all. I am hoping to still do a webinar, a online class with Maria Strange later this year We typically do one in the spring, but it didn't happen because she was moving and I had a baby. So we're hoping this fall it'll happen. And I've got some other actually in-person classes I'm hoping to get lined up to be teaching too. So please like, subscribe, comment, share the podcast with anyone who you feel this would be advantageous for. I do a variety of topics, and I do have ones about navigating military life for new military spouses. So if you are new to the military, or if you have family who have joined and you'd like to understand it better, I've got resources. They're in past episodes. I've done ones on the USO. I've done it on the Red Cross, DEERS, TRICARE, lots of different fun stuff. So hopefully that's all helpful for you all. That said, I hope everybody has a fabulous 4th of July with friends, families, loved ones, anyone, or just take a break and think about, I don't know. I love celebrating the 4th of July. I totally deck out my house in red, white, and blue. Kind of looks like our house exploded red, white, and blue right now, and I love it. So that's just me. It's one of my favorite holidays. I can't wait for the fireworks displays. Oh, I love fireworks. So, and honestly, military, we know how to do fireworks displays. I'm just going to throw that out last thing. If you ever want to see a fantastic fireworks display, find a military installation and get close enough to see theirs. Military, we know how to blow things up. We know how to blow things up really, really well. Just saying it. Just putting that out there. That is my personal opinion. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week, like I said before. And as always, you are listening to Life of a Military Wife, and I am your host, Sam Wolf.